I'm Andrew MacDowall, Founding Director of Toros Advisory, a UK-based strategic advisory company that helps clients identify opportunity and manage risk in markets around the world. I'm also a RACC-IT ambassador. I'm joined today by Andreea Iosub, managing partner at Elevn, a UK-based digital transformation company. Hi, Andreea. Thanks for coming on.
Hi, Andrew. Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Great to see you. It'd be great to start off by hearing a little bit more about how you got where we are today as the managing partner of a new digital transformation company. How's your career path shaped up? What have been the influences that have brought you to what you're doing now?
Thank you for that. So I'm Romanian, which means I started my career in Romania maybe, 17 years ago, something like that. And at the time, I founded my first consulting company in Romania. It was in Northeast Romania. And it was at a time where consulting wasn't really a thing in Romania, especially in my region, right? But I was very stubborn. I think it had to do with me being in my early 20s. That might have been a reason for my stubbornness. And I was like, I'm going to do this.
I'm 41 and I'm still stubborn. So.
I don't think it ever goes away, does it? That's it, but it's good. It's good. So I said, I'm going to do this. I'm not sure exactly what will come of it. But anyway, let's try it. So I set up the company. And it was at a time where Romania had been part of the EU for some time now, but there was this opportunity. There were lots of projects and grants being given at the EU level, right? So I started applying. There were loads of contracts, especially opportunities on the consulting side, a lot around strategy change and just international cooperation in general, right? So this is how I started in consulting. And instead of trying to find clients locally, I started applying straight to the European Commission. But overnight, essentially, I became an international company, but it was just me having this tiny office and my laptop and not really knowing how to do things, right? So it was a happy coincidence, probably merging risk-taking with opportunity at the time and just the context, right? So it was really good because we started getting some international projects and I grew a team at the time, and the work we were doing was mostly in Europe and Asia because there was a lot of work on collaboration, but we are working with large companies, especially in strategy and change and how do you do delivery at international level. So it was a big deal at the time, and this received a lot of attention and funding because it's one thing to work with teams that are local versus it's a completely different thing to work with teams that are either in different countries in the same continent or across continents, right? So that was the beginning. That was the company at the time. Fast forward maybe to 2016, I was still traveling a lot, doing a lot of international projects and so on. So that was the moment I decided to move to the UK. And I remember this because basically, I landed here the day the Brexit vote was announced. So I was like, okay, this is going to be interesting. So initially, the plan was for me to live here, but also live in Romania, go back and forth and manage the company as well. Obviously, with Brexit and all the changes, that didn't go that way. But I decided to stay in the UK because I really like the country. It has everything in terms of things that I appreciate, really. So it's just the intercultural aspect, how fast business is happening, just innovation aspect as well. So there are loads of things that I actually value. So I decided to stay here, and I had to start from scratch because I didn't have a network or anything here. So I started with my background. I started getting some contracting work, doing consulting as well, mostly international level as well. And I started doing a lot of technical delivery. So a lot of the work started gearing towards digital transformation, building platforms, working with large IT teams, again, across the world. That seems to be a constant in my career, working globally. And at some point, I remember I was doing a project for a client, and it was strategy. They were operating in over 140 countries, and I was working with a team of plus 20 researchers, and we were collecting data from all these countries. And the amount of data we were collecting, we weren't able to process. It was very laborious, and I had access to one of the most brilliant people and in the team, right? So it was still hard. So that's when I realized data and AI, these are going to be such big things that I want to stop everything that I'm doing and focus more on that and get to understand it better, right? So that's when I took a career break. I went back to school here and I did a master's degree, but it was a research degree in future trends in data and what does this mean for the industry as a whole, but also from a business perspective, because we have this technology coming in and we don't really know what to do with it, right? So, and after that, I worked for a consulting company here in the UK, and I had different roles, mostly on leading data in delivery. And then it was mostly in the financial services sector. So I worked in insurance, banking, with fintechs a lot. And then I did a short stint, let's call it, for a bank. So I was the director of data strategy and transformation, and then went back to consulting and started Elevn. So this brings us kind of to present moment. So basically, yeah, I would say my profile is a mix between being a practitioner, so actually delivering the work and working with the teams, and consulting, providing that strategic expertise and seeing where things are going and answering the most challenging questions when it comes to technology and business. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. And interesting to hear your experiences in the UK. And we may touch on that again a bit later. Perhaps you could explain in layman's terms what digital transformation means and those data and AI aspects that you're working on a day-to-day basis. What does that mean to a layperson? And why do companies need it?
I'm glad you asked me that, because it's the way I explain it. I want to use very simple words. So for me, technology is changing all the time, right? You have new technology coming in, and digital transformation answers one question. And that question is, so what? So what? What does this mean? We had this coming through, right? We have cloud technology coming in. So what? What does this mean for my business, right? Now we have AI coming in. So what? What does that actually mean, right? For the way I operate, for the way my teams work, for my customer, for my bottom line, which is profit and the value that I bring. So in a nutshell, that's what digital transformation does. When done right, it answers that question and it adds value to the company, right? There's never, I would say, since the technical revolution, right? Digital transformation has been around, and it will be around as
when you say technical revolution,
whatever.
When would you date? When would you date that?
Maybe the beginning of the internet. That's when things change, right? That would be really interesting. I'm going to look into that. What's the history of digital transformation? But that's for me, that's moment zero, right? And everyone became. We couldn't stop it, right? It was out of the box. There we go. We're still in it. But moving forward, I don't think there will ever be a point where digital transformation will not be relevant, because we're always going to have new technology coming in, right? And we'll need to just adjust to everything that's coming and thrive, not just adjust, right? Thrive.
Yeah, as you say, make companies work better.
Yeah.
Can you think of any particular use cases, whether they be from your experience or more generally, of how a company has had a successful digital transformation and what that has brought to them?
Yeah, I can give you several examples from my work. If I think we're going to need to edit this one, because let me think of one that's more relevant for this. Okay, I can actually give a few examples and we can put it in categories, right? So at the basic level, you can go from legacy technology, legacy infrastructure to modernized infrastructure. So that's a classic one. And I would say for me, that's foundational level of transformation. To be honest, for me, that's not so exciting. It needs to be done for various reasons. Sometimes the technology is really old. So for example, you move from a on-prem data warehouse to the cloud. That was classic transformation, because you had to move everything that you have completely to the cloud, and then there were you needed to move the data, you needed to change the way you apply governance, you needed to change the way your teams worked with the data there, right? So there was just a big transformation program. But for me, those are foundational things in general when we move from an old technology to a new one. In the same category, you might also have from when you move to manual processes to automated processes, or for example, when you have people working on a spreadsheet and all of a sudden you build a platform so they can interact with their customers and so on. Again, that for me would fit more into the foundational area where you have a lot of technology build or introducing new technologies or migrating from old to new. There's also transformation that happens, and this is for me probably the most exciting part, is that happens at the level of how businesses operate, right? So I will give you an example. There was a big shift in the past, but it's still happening, where data uses were changing and data operating models in general were changing from centralized. This means, in simple terms, you had data teams and they were doing everything from you, from generating reports, doing analytics for you. And as a business user, you would just submit a request and it will stay there on the backlog and you will wait for them to when they have time and whatever. As you can imagine, it's not very efficient because obviously that created a lot of bottlenecks, right? And then the transformation is to a decentralized model. There are various models. Just in data, for example, there's hub and spoke. Just to give an example there, what that means is data is now being democratized and the power is in the hands of the business users, right? Instead of you actually going to the centralized team, the role of the centralized team is to make sure you have access to the right infrastructure, you have access to the right governance, but the way you use data and the way you create your own reports, your just analytics in general and your own data product, that's up to you and based on the priorities of your business line in general. So this creates a huge change. Is quite difficult to implement, but it brings a lot of value for every employee, for the business line, but also for the way the company serves the clients, right? Because it completely changes everything. This is just a simple example. You might also have situations in which, and this I'm seeing a lot of it right now, a lot of the work is focusing on if we redesign the way companies work using AI first, because until now we've been in a situation where we've used technology to either become more efficient or reduce risk, reduce cost, just provide more value to customers and so on. So it was always optimization, right? Now with a lot of the work that's being done in AI, and to be honest, I swear a lot of the conversations I'm having every day with customers, maybe 70, 80% is them trying to understand what can I do with AI. So I can understand that it's quite big. So the way we're looking at transformation now is holistically. So we're looking at the entire company and saying, if I'm redesigning everything I do from scratch and forget everything I know, and I use a lot of design thinking, and if I want to make it AI first rather than seeing how I can use AI to optimize things. What does this mean? So it's challenging the entire infrastructure and status quo, the way we think about technology, business, the way operating models work, processes work, and everything around it. So I would say these are the main three buckets that I see in digital transformation. So foundational things, as I mentioned, those migration. Then you have more on the business side, operational side. And now the AI boom that has happened, which is across the business, front and center, everywhere. So I would put it in its own bucket, essentially. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you. I mean, I know I was talking to a senior businessman a couple of weeks ago who was very skeptical about the rise of AI and saying some of the tools aren't working particularly well. And then obviously you have people who see AI as a great threat that will destroy jobs. What's your response to those two criticisms?
There are two things here. So obviously with the way I explain it, and I can really understand the concern. So I don't want to approach this from a place of naivety and saying this will solve our problems, but it's a little bit the way I look at it is like the moment we discovered fire, right? We can use fire to cook dinner, or we can use fire to really cause a lot of damage, right? So
that's Prometheus.
Yeah, exactly. So it really is in our hands, which is why I go back to the basics, to be honest. So when I was at university, my data science professor asked us first class, what's the most important skill of a data scientist? Do you know what the answer was? Ethics. Because that's number one, the way we build a data model, the way we use data, the way we make sure that we don't take out data just because the model will be skewed and we wanted to just make it more efficient, right? So it is that conversation around, do we look at data and honestly see the story that it tells us, or do we want to have a story in advance and then select the data to confirm the story that we have in our head, right? So that's why ethics is just number one. It should be embedded in everything that we do, regardless of the technology we use. Because let's be honest, if we don't have that, we have so many examples where the use of technology has caused harm. So we shouldn't be naive about it, right? So that's one thing. This being said, it's a huge opportunity, and I've seen it change even the way we build things from a software development perspective, even in the way we do creative work, and even in the way, I've seen it across the businesses change everything. So I've seen it in practice, and I've seen the value that it brings. And also right now, because I'm in the business of providing value to clients, I need to show return on investment, and that I need to measure it, right? Otherwise, how do I know that I'm not a consultant that sells decks, essentially, right? We provide transformation. So these are measurable things. You can measure it. However, with everything that has to do with innovation in general, you can measure it looking backwards. So basically, I need 3 to 6, basically, in general, I would say months, to be able to say this has been the impact on this company and this is the value that we've created, right? It doesn't mean unlimited spend, because you start small and you see value straight away. But there are definitely ways and you can measure it, and it's precise science, right? So that's on the value side and on the ethics side. On your first point around it's not here yet, it's not going to create value, it still has a lot of errors and things like that. Yes, it's being improved day by day. So yes, it will continue to have errors, because this is the thing with data. From the moment we build the first data models, and it took us, I don't know, I remember my first one, I think I worked on it for 6 to 8 weeks, and it still had errors to the end of it. So, and right now, probably that work would have been done in 1 hour, which is, embarrassing if you think about it, how much time I've spent on it. So yes, that will always be the case when you work with data in general. That's why you have to constantly perfect it, right? Because AI fundamentally is working with data and how we use that and what we produce from it. So that's constantly improving, and I don't need to tell you about, even if you open LinkedIn, honestly, I see so many people, this has happened and it's the best thing ever and it's going to change everything. So we're being bombarded with that in terms of innovation happening in the AI space. And to the skeptics out there, I would say this. There has been a recent report from Deloitte, because they look in the state of adoption, generative AI adoption. And they've asked executives across the world, when do they think this change will happen? Like radical change to the point their business operates, everything. And most of the answers were around 1 to 3 years. That's when it happens. There were maybe less than 1% from what I remember from the report that said never, change will never happen, right? So I would say people who said 1 to 3 years, I would agree with that, right? But there will always be people who will be in denial, who will not really recognize the transformation aspect here. And that's okay. That really is okay. The market will react to that as well. It's that's the game of change, isn't it? You sometimes have early adopters, then there's the wave, and then you have people at the end as well who will have to come with us. So yeah, that's what we're seeing in the market anyway. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you. You may be talking to a late adopter here. We talked a bit earlier about how digital transformation more often than not fails, you were saying. I find that very interesting. It's not something I necessarily would have guessed, given the benefits that I know it brings, as you've outlined. Why does it fail? And how?
Depending on what book you read and what study you read, it can be anything fail rate from 50% to 80%. So it's quite big, right? But then it depends on how you measure it and what factors do you consider there. Do you consider the classic triangle in project management, which is scope, time, and resources. Did we deliver that, right? If we failed in any of those three aspects, then the whole thing has been failure, right? It depends on how you define the framework to begin with. But for me, I would say the number one reason that digital transformation is either successful or it fails, it's always culture. And after I've done so many projects and I've worked with so many companies, I can say this hand on heart, this has always been the differentiating factors. So companies that are willing to also change their culture, in the same time, they're changing their technology, they're changing ways of working, they're changing everything around their operating model and the way people use technology, then those will be the successful projects. And at this point, to be honest, after delivering so many transformation projects, I can tell you from the beginning how that will go, if that will happen or not. And also culture is something so soft and so it's very hard to define. But I will also just share from my experience and maybe give you some examples. So if you are in a culture where you take people with you on the journey, right? And people are willing to adopt it and they are, okay, let's try it. Let's do this. I can see new potential. I can see where things are going. Then that's really positive. You can see it. And it's always the rhythm and the pace is set by leaders as well, right? So if they are behind the change, if they really support it, then this will absolutely happen much easier and it will be successful. I've also seen situation the opposite side where leaders change their mind weeks in, months in, and they're going back and forth. And there's that feeling of, we're not sure how we're going to do this, or maybe we go back to the old ways. So there will always be that resistance but that's a factor in the culture aspect that I've seen just pushes projects back, right? So you might have a long migration that you invested sometimes millions in, and you're at the point of getting business value out of it. And then you decide, actually, we're going to change it again, right? So it's change on top of change on top of change, which doesn't help. So number one factor that differentiates success from failure for me is the culture of an organization. And it's something that leaders can control. Obviously, us as practitioners, as consultants coming in, we can influence and we can definitely advise and set it right, because a lot of the effort put in is actually taking the stakeholders with you on the journey and explaining why we're doing everything that we're doing and what does this mean for you and for the company. But if there's not that willingness from the leadership team in general to support the change, then that's a great risk there for failure.
Got it. Thank you. I think that those cultural aspects in an organization are hugely important. And as you say, the aspect of leadership and buy-in and staying the course.
But do you know what's interesting? Because whenever I talk to leaders and when we set the budget for the project, there's almost the element of cultural change and taking people with us on the journey. That slice receives the least amount of funding, because a lot of the funding goes on technology and everything else. But then if this is the small pebble that will completely tip everything over, then we need to give it more attention.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. I think that's something that's very much worth bearing in mind for leaders of organizations thinking about digital transformation and its necessity. Talking on a different aspect of culture, obviously you've come to the UK from Romania, and you said earlier on sort of you're impressed by sort of the pace of business here. How do you think Romania and Britain differ? What differences have you observed in working culture, in business culture? And what are the strengths and weaknesses of both?
Oh, I think this is where you absolutely found my weakness. Because speaking of weaknesses and strengths, right? So although I'm Romanian and I started my company in Romania, I've almost never worked with Romanian companies. So I've mostly worked at international level. And to be honest, is also one of the reasons I'm a member in RACC-IT, because I come from Romania. part of my identity is there and so on, but I feel I missed out on so much. And I like being a part of RACC-IT because I get to learn about the country I come from and the way business is done there and what changes are happening, political, social level, cultural level, right? So I think I would say I'm definitely not the right person to ask because I'm also learning, right? So for me, RACC-IT is that environment where I learn that. However, what I've noticed, because I've always worked across cultures, I do this, and I do this with all my teams, essentially. So building that intercultural communication competence, but it's also that cognitive flexibility. And I've noticed, especially in London, that's a high degree. All teams have that because you have people from all over coming here, and London attracts so many high quality professionals from across, all the fields essentially. So you see that. So it's a great space for collaborating, getting new ideas out there. And it's quite easy just to get business started and to build a network. Remember, I came here with no network, right? So it's, and here I am doing a podcast with you, right? So, as I said, I'm still learning, looking at the differences. But for me, being in the UK and doing business here and also internationally is kind of home. It's the home part for me.
Great. Now, of course. But are there things that we could do better?
Oh, there's
given
always
the international environment that you've been in, contrasted with other countries.
There's always room for that. So as I mentioned, maybe the last 5-7 years, I've mostly worked in the financial services sector, right? And I can see in terms of innovation, especially in cross-border payments and doing business internationally, I can see a lot of the innovation coming from startups in Asia, for example. It's quite hard to get it over the line here for some reason, although the fintech community is huge. And I'm also a fintech champion and part of various fintech communities in the UK. Just in terms of regulation and how willing we are to change and to adopt new things and innovation in banking in general, that seems to be slower, and we can learn from other parts of the world. So I've seen this one because it's just closer to the work that I'm doing at the moment. So that would be one thing that I'm seeing. Yeah.
That's very interesting. Thank you. I think one thing, and I don't want to oversimplify this, but there, very broadly speaking, there does seem to be an argument that there's sort of dichotomy between growth and regulation. And is your feeling that the UK and Europe has tilted too far on the regulatory side?
It depends on who you're asking. It's quite funny. I was once at a conference and there was a panel and you had representative of UK businesses, and then you also had a representative from the European Commission, and they were discussing how much AI regulation they need. And the European Commission representative said every company needs to have their own team focusing just on AI regulation alone. That's it. And then the representative of the companies in the UK, they were like, actually, this is the perfect time because we have no regulation and that's where we should push forward with it and do as much business as we can. So we will always have that tension. The reality is we need to be somewhere in the middle. And also coming back to the recent report that I mentioned earlier, part of the challenges that businesses report on when adopting AI is lack of regulation. So actually, we're in a situation, especially with new technologies, they will feel much more safer to adopt them if they had a good regulatory framework. And I can understand that, right? I can really understand that. So we're always going to have this push and pull, and transformation will be in the middle. Yeah, that's why I said it will never go away.
And finally, on fintech, I mean, do you think recent reforms to promote open banking a step in the right direction, and a sign that regulators are catching up?
Yeah, I definitely think so. So I'm a huge fan of open banking, and I can see a lot of positive aspects coming from it. Even from just it allowed so many new startups to come on the market. And to be honest, I really feel that the more companies you have, even at grassroots level, trying things out, even if they don't succeed or they end up merging or they end up being bought or so ever, it just brings new ideas and new ways of working. So open banking has opened a lot of doors to that. So yes, major fan.
Great. Good to hear. My very final question, what are your hopes for Elevn over the coming years?
Oh, that's really good. So I have big plans, to be honest. So at the moment, we're 5 partners and we all bring different competencies. Obviously, I've talked a lot about data and AI because this is my specialty. But we have, as I said, the technology and change practitioners as well. And we work to deliver digital transformation across the board. Right. So my plan is for Elevn, we definitely want to expand past the borders of UK. And that's not just because my profile is international, but yeah, that's the way I see it. And we want to get to a place where we can actually use technology to change the way businesses work and to make them more efficient, but also to provide more value to their customers, essentially. So whenever we can help with that, that's where we want to be. Yeah.
Excellent. Good luck with Elevn.
Thank you.
And all that lies ahead. And Andreea Iosub, thank you very much for joining us on the RACC-IT podcast.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you, Andrew.